Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to tell you, you've got the oily rag this morning, not the engineer. Piers Wauchope is our number one in the South East and sadly can't be here today. I want to be very brief. I wanted to touch on three things. First of all, as you can see, I'm terribly old, so I was around for the last referendum. The last referendum, the actual propaganda that was put out there is exactly the same as it is now. We must stay. In those days, we were told by a very lone voice in the wilderness called Lord Denning, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, before you go into the ballot box and before you put your cross in the box, read the small print. Now, if you look at me now, I have 2 pairs of glasses. The reason for that is, since the 1975 referendum, I have been doing nothing else other than reading the small print. And I have not liked what I've seen. I'd like to go on. That covers Lord Denning. I have 2 other lords I'd like to talk about, and very briefly. The second one is Lord Pearson of Rannoch. Lord Pearson is the next lone man in the wilderness. He has supported UKIP through thick and thin. He has been pilloried and vilified in the press for what he's done and said, but he's the most marvellous of men. Lord Pearson, if you're watching this, thank you from all of us. We know how difficult it's been for you. Finally, a lord that you might not know about. 2 weeks ago tomorrow, on the order paper in the House of Lords, was a question that should have been asked on the following Monday. It was made by Lord James of Blackheath, and if anybody wants to talk to me about it afterwards, they can. I haven't got the time to talk about it now. But on the Monday, I was really looking forward to listening to this in the House of Lords, and I found that it wasn't being discussed. He'd been hauled into the Chief Whip's office. Lord Taylor of Holbeach, I believe, is the Chief Whip in the House of Lords, and he was told it could not go on the agenda and would not be discussed. So it was pulled from the order paper. It was to do with the treaties that have been signed, and that this particular question was to do with the Vienna Convention. And the treaty under the Vienna Convention would make some of the treaties that we've signed in the EU null and void. He was not allowed to have it discussed. So there are my 3 lords. I then moved to the House of Commons. Gerard touched upon it earlier when he said that 65% of constituencies voted out. That, if my maths is any good, I'm a good working class girl, not the best at maths, but that leaves me with 422 and a half MPs that should have voted for us to leave because they should have supported their own constituents. My own constituency voted 62% out, that's Folkestone and Hythe. That night of the referendum, our MP didn't even bother to turn up. The most important, I think, night in probably British history for many years, he wasn't there. So that is the percentages that have voted out, and they're not being supported across the board. The half person, I think, is probably the MP that is now standing in Peterborough. We have here today, ladies and gentlemen, a gentleman who's going to stand for UKIP in Peterborough, and if anybody would like to talk to him afterwards, I'm sure he'd be delighted to do so. So that is the half of the MP. We're after you, all 422 of you. There will be a general election. Look out, we're there. That deals with the House of Commons, except for one thing. The Conservatives have had a little breakaway group, and I think they're called the ERG, and they're headed up by somebody called Jacob Rees-Mogg, who our Somerset constituents now say he's become known as Judas Rees-Mogg. That particular group is only allowed to mirror what is going on in the government under Mrs May. Which brings me to the final point that I want to talk about, which are our armed forces. You will know our armed forces as Her Majesty's Armed Forces. This will not happen for much longer. They are being subsumed under the EU Defence Force. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the revaling for the whole of the country. They are our armed forces. They are not for sale to anybody. And please, please vote UKIP, make Brexit happen, because unless you do, we will lose the lot. Thank you very much.